So we often hear the term depth or depth of cover when it comes to creating buck bedding opportunities on properties. I mean, I've talked a lot about liking to create great depth on properties, and you hear a lot of other habitat managers reference that as well. But that does not mean that you absolutely have to have depth on your property in order to bed bucks on your property. So you can have a small acreage property or a property with limited cover and still have buck bedding opportunities on that property. I was actually reflecting on the last 5 bucks I've shot, and I realized today that none of them were in areas that had a good deal of depth or depth of cover to them. So today I'm going to go around and I'm actually going to show you where all 5 of those bucks were bedded, because I know where all 5 of those bucks were bedded, and we're going to look at the elements that made those areas good bedding areas even though they didn't have good depth to them. So stick with me and we'll go check it out. Alright, we'll go in order from the year they were shot. So we'll start in 2018. So this was my 2018 bull bucks bedding location. He was bedded right up against that log. Now this tree was not down in 2018, so that log went all the way over there, and he bedded right up next to that log. So he literally moved from that log about 10 yards over to this tree right here, and I shot him on an evening hunt out of the bow stand right up there when he was licking on this branch right here. So from his bed right here, it's probably about 70 yards to the food that way. It's about 50 yards to a strip of food that way. It is probably about 60, 70 yards to a switchgrass screen that I've put in place that way, and probably another 60, 70 yards to another switchgrass screen that's right over there. So this bed right here sits basically in the center of this small, probably 7-ish acre bedding area that I've enhanced. My only form of enhancement in here has been just general TSI. I've been cutting the junk in here, dropping it down, leaving trails for the deer to move around in here, and allowing that regen to blow up. So he is in the center, so as far as depth goes, he picked the deepest spot in this small acreage setting, but it is not far from the food at all. So it's not like he had to be 300 yards back in the timber here. He's here because it feels very, very secure. So when he's sitting there, he's got a good backdrop. He's in the middle of the thick cover. He can look out over all of this to see if there's any potential danger. And I shot him early season, so south wind coming from that way is coming right over his back. So it's a pretty bulletproof spot as far as security goes. It's just that night he happened to make the wrong decision and head out that direction with the wind at his back, and I was up in the stand and was able to get a shot at him. All right, let's fast forward to 2019 bow buck. So it was actually opening night of bow hunting. He was bedded right in here with 2 other bucks. So he was there. I think they were kind of scattered. Boom, boom, boom. I'm in the same exact bedding thicket that I killed that buck in 2018 in. And my stand is right over there. So he was bedded in the middle of this prickly ash thicket. There's some other regen in here too. But basically right here in the middle of the thick again. But there was space here for him to bed down, and I've actually had cut in a trail going that direction and cut out a trail going that direction right here to encourage the movement kind of right through this bedding area and then cutting up towards the deer stand. So what happened that night is he actually came out this trail that I had in here, and he cut right up this other trail that I have cut right here, popped out at about 45 yards right at the end of this trail. There's my stand up in that tree right there, you can see it. I did not shoot him right here. He actually kind of picked me off and went back down in the bedding thicket. But what happened is there's where he was bedded. He popped out there, cut back down. He ended up walking down in the bottom, and then the lead buck of the three came right up this little trail I got cut in here. They all walked by right here. So you can see, he ended up standing about right here. That was 30 yards from the stand. And for whatever reason, I mean, the leaves are still on the tree, so that doesn't stand out as much. But he did not notice me, and I got a 30-yard shot right here. And he ended up going and dying right over there. So this spot does not have a ton of depth at all. So why is it good? Well, the biggest reason why it's good is because I did the TSI in here. So I had a lot of cover in here. When you get down to the deer's level, there's all kinds of different screening in here, and I'm getting the woody regen in here as well. So there's incentive for them to be in here from a browse standpoint. But it is very secure because this is a bottom. I know I talk a lot about bedding on hilltops and points and benches and things like that. Bottoms can be very powerful bedding options too. This is just a brushy bottom that the deer absolutely love, and the hill goes up all the way around it. So there's the hill's actually kind of acting like a screen, and it makes it feel much more secure in here. And then what we've also done is add all that switchgrass around the edge to really screen this off so that they can feel very, very secure down here. Here's that switchgrass edge, and this has really made this bottom pop. And it's not just a thin strip of switchgrass. I mean, this goes up and down the hill there, but this area has really been enhanced by adding this element of security, even a deer bed right there, to this area. And I'm okay with the deer bedding right here too, because they can't see us. We access from over there, but when they're on this side of the hill, they can't see us, and as long as we play the wind right, they can't smell us either. Not a very big piece at all, but it can still bed bucks. We've bedded not just the two that I shot out of here, but we've seen three of the biggest bucks we've ever seen on our property down in this bedding area. And just because of, I don't know, extenuating circumstances, just never got a chance at killing them. But they were down in here because it is a very secure little brushy bottom. All right, 2021 bull buck. So he was bedded right up in here. You can see I got a hinge tree. There's actually been a lot of chop and drop going on kind of along this property line here. But he chose to bed right here that night, and I got the food right up the hill. So as the crow flies, I mean, we're talking probably 70-ish yards at most, not even, maybe 60. But right up over the hill is the food. But sitting in his bed right now, you can see why he liked it here. So here we're on a little bit of a knoll. You can look down over the valley. He's got a great view all the way around him. He's got a very strong backstop, nice little overhead canopy. And this is a spot a buck would love to bed. So I remember that night, it was hot. It was a stagnant weather pattern. It was like 70-some degrees in early October. So I thought there was no way, I had my son with me, I thought there was no way we were gonna get a chance at a buck. But it was a rising full moon in the evening. My buddy who swears by the moon stuff said that's what you want, stagnant weather pattern, rising full moon. And for whatever reason, if it was the moon, I don't know, sure seemed like it, but those deer were moving that night, and we had a ton of deer on the plot, and he was out very early too, which was surprising on a hot evening. But eventually he worked his way in, and I got a 20-yard shot with my son. So probably the most memorable hunt I've ever been on, because we were both very fired up after that one. You can see on this one I have a really solid screen with the edge feathering here. It's tough to see out. I do need to double down and add some switch on the back side of that. But this has been a very good screen here. And the buck was bedded down on that bottom, so when he's way down there, he's got a screen like this on the edge. It is tough to see out, especially when we're going to add some switchgrass. You can see some in the back there splitting up the plot. But I'll add some on this edge here eventually, and it'll be a bulletproof screen and just really amp up the security level of the bedding back in the timber. All right, now for the big dog. My buck of a lifetime, my 2022 bull buck. He was bedded right here. Now you can see behind him, he had a great backstop. But the crazy thing is there is an alfalfa field maybe 20 yards that way. So he was bedded right on the edge of the field. And when you look out of his bed, that's where all the depth is. There's actually great depth going that way, but he did not bed out in the center of all that. He bedded right here. So we did have camera intel, so I knew that this deer was in this area, but I would have never guessed that he was bedded right here. I would have thought he would have been bedded probably further down the marsh that direction, or off that way and coming out to the alfalfa. But no, he chose this spot. He was 5.5 years old when I got him. But for that's what big bucks do often. They find those overlook locations, the ones you would never think they would bed in. And this is where he was at. And from right where he was bedded, I was in, you can kind of see it, small portable right up there, no more than 30 yards away from his bed. So he was literally sitting right here the whole time I was up there. I had no idea until he started working his way that way. What a great spot though. Like, he could literally sit and watch the neighbors right there, because they do bow hunt and they rifle hunt too. So you could sit and watch them probably go to and from their stand, and they would have no idea that he was back in here, because this Reed's Canary and stuff would have been propped up then. He's got all these shrubs around him. He can just sit and look that direction, or he can just allow the northwest to come over his back and check out this direction where it's a little bit more open. But he had a pretty bulletproof spot right there as far as security. And that night he just made his way right through here about a half hour before dark. I watched him kind of pop up into these small popples right here. It just so happens we have a really nice big fresh rub there too from last year. Yeah, he just kind of worked his way out right here, and I was right there in that popple. It was 19 yards when he stepped out. And he will be the biggest buck I ever shoot. I mean, a booner in Minnesota is really tough to come by, and he ended up officially going 180 gross, 180 and 0 ace, and I did have him officially scored. But a booner is just, it's a bit of a unicorn here. We're not Iowa, we're not Kansas, Ohio, Illinois. A booner is a once-in-a-lifetime deer, and I am very ecstatic that I got that opportunity at him. Biggest reason it's tough to grow big deer here is we have our rifle season during peak rut. So everybody's in the game during the rut because the bucks are going so hard. But every now and then one gets past, and we do have the genetics here where they can blow up if they get old enough. It's just tough to get them to that 4 and 5 year old age class. But that one made it. He was a survivor until that night, and it all worked out. And someday I'm going to do a kind of a total recap on that deer. Fun story behind him. But for now, that was his bedding location down there. That's where I got him. All right. And lastly is my 2023 rifle buck. Actually the first buck I've shot with my rifle in Minnesota since 2007. Very much a bow hunter, but had my son with me that night, and we still had a very fun hunt with the rifle. So he was bedded right here. Now I've since added that log. That log wasn't here before, but he was bedded right here, and this was his view. So really he was up on the edge of the switch. I always share that with warm season grass bedding. They like to bed up on the edge of the thick. So he was on the edge of the switchgrass, kind of looking out over it. There's a slight valley right there. Now the crazy thing about him being bedded right here is there's barely any depth to this spot. We literally accessed right there. So we're within about probably 80 yards of this bedding location. There's egg about 50 yards that way, 50, 60 yards that way. And then I got a strip of clover, probably about 40-ish yards that way. So if I would have thought a buck was bedded out here, I would have definitely expected him to be bedded out in the middle there on one of those knolls. But for whatever reason, this is the spot he chose, right here. Now, it does make sense though that he would choose this spot because he has a northwest coming over his back, and he does have a decent lookout kind of up out over the valley. It's just not quite as deep as I thought he'd bed. So I don't know, if we're thinking depth of cover, he should have been out in the middle, but he knew this spot was a good spot for him, so that's why he bedded here. He felt secure, and that's the key to all of this, is security. When you're creating bedding, you want security. If you can create security, you don't necessarily need depth. So is depth of cover important? Absolutely. I want to get as much depth on properties as I can, but these rules that we talk about, needing depth and things like that, these are not hard and fast rules. You know, in an ideal situation, we'll try to create depth on a property, but the biggest reason we want to create depth is because if we have depth, it ensures security. Because the deeper in the timber you go, generally the less human intrusion, so therefore the more security the deer feels. And the bucks who need that security, they will absolutely bed in those locations deep in the timber if that's the most secure bedding location on that property. But if you can set your property up in a way where you can create security in all the bedding, you can still get bucks to bed in locations that aren't necessarily deep within the cover. Now does, they really do love bedding close to those food sources, and I like to try to stack the does as close to those food sources as possible. But bucks are just looking for that most secure bedding location, whether it's deep in the timber or, like with my nicest buck, 20 yards off a food source. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Y'all take care. God bless.